Hello everyone, I'm Spencer Campbell, and this is another how to play RUNE video. This one specifically is about the exploration rules, which are the most recent rules that have been released for the playtest that's going on right now for RUNE. RUNE is a solo Souls-like RPG that I'm currently developing right now that kind of goes between two phases of play, exploration and combat. Previous playtest material and some stuff that's still out there right now is focused on combat, which is this sort of tactical grid combat where you're facing off against enemies that have an AI system designed based off of how you roll dice and they sort of program their moves. You got to try and survive. It's very tactical, it's tense, and tries to capture that Souls-like vibe. The other thing that we see in Souls-like games is the idea of exploration of a lonely, cursed, horrible world. And that is what the exploration rules in RUNE are trying to accomplish. So this video is going to be me trying to talk to you a little bit about how exploration generally works. Sorry, my dog is walking by right now. How exploration generally works. And I'm going to show you it through the lens of the sample realm that has been released. Don't worry, I'm not going to spoil everything that's in the realm. If you want to explore and experience the realm on your own, that's totally fine. I'm not going to go through all the places in this realm, but I'm going to show you just a little bit so you understand how exploration works in RUNE. So exploration is based off of a point crawl approach with moving around a map. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, a point crawl is a sort of system that is used to explore maps like this, where you have key points on it, here numbered with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you crawl, aka move between those points. This is a little bit different than other systems that might use a hex crawl or something like that, where you move from one specific hex to the other, and there's a lot of tracking of things like time and resources. That stuff is still tracked with a point crawl, but it is abstracted out a little bit more, where distances between points don't really matter as much as it matters in something like a hex crawl, where it gets very precise with that stuff. So in RUNE, you are going to use this point crawl approach as you explore key locations in realms. What is a realm? A realm is a unique location, kind of segmented off from the rest of the world, that you as the player are going to explore to the fullest to try and find the Rune Lord, the person who rules over that realm, slay them, and take their power to carve it into your own being. Think of realms as like unique environments or biomes of sorts that you would see in other Souls-like games, right? So Elden Ring is the most recent one to come out, and so that has some very clear like regions or realms to it, right? Caelid feels very different than Limgrave, these two zones that are right next to each other. That's the vibe that we're going with here with RUNE, where each realm is going to feel totally different than the others. But even though they are different, they will have some similar functions or features or mechanics that link them all together, so that as you go from one realm to the next, you'll still feel like there's a unified experience that you're having while playing RUNE. So this this realm, for example, is the Grim Coast. It is the sample realm that is going on in the RUNE playtest right now. As you can see, there are 7 points of interest on this particular map. Other realms might have fewer points of interest. They're very small, kind of tight experiences. Others might be bigger, vast experiences that take you multiple play sessions to get through. So let's talk about how you explore a rune and ultimately what your goal is. Like I said, your ultimate goal is to find and kill the Rune Lord. Every realm has a Rune Lord, which is basically the boss of the region. You kill the boss, and you're going to get some new unique power from that boss. Advancement in RUNE is a little bit different than maybe advancement in traditional RPGs. There's not a lot of like increasing of stats and things like that, because you don't really have that many stats. You have gear, the equipment that you carry, so finding gear in realms is going to be an important part of it. But slaying rune lords doesn't necessarily do something like +2 to your health. They usually give you some sort of strange, interesting new trait to your character, a way that allows you to play the game in a totally new way. And that new way could affect combat, but it could also affect the exploration rules. I won't spoil what the Rune Lord of the Grim Coast gives you. You'll have to slay them to find out what they will give you. So let's talk about moving around the Grim Coast, or generally moving around in exploration. As you move between places, you move between points that are connected on the map. For example, in the Grim Coast, you're going to start at point 1. This is the sigil, which we'll talk about in a second. And from there, you can move to any location that is connected to this point, which means I could move from 1 to 2 or 1 to 3. Either one I can go to when I decide I want to travel between points. It doesn't matter the distance between them or anything like that. As long as they're connected, you can move to those 2 points. Whenever you move to another point in the world, the realm clock advances. And now is a good time to introduce what the realm clock is. Every realm has its own unique clock, and this is going to be very unique to each realm. So I'll talk broadly about what realm clocks are, but you'll have to look and see what each realm's clock is and how it functions. Basically, a realm clock is a sometimes race against time or a ticking meter that signals the introduction of some sort of significant change to the realm. In the Grim Coast, the realm clock is a 4-segment clock that advances every time you travel or do things at points, and it basically switches the day-night cycle of the islands. So every time that clock, that 4-segment clock you see on the map fills up, it switches from day to night or night to day. That's important for the Grim Coast because what you're able to do at locations differs depending on if it's night and day, so you need to be a little strategic about when you show up to certain points or what you might discover at certain points. Other realm clocks for other places might be bigger or more significant. Like there might be a 20-segment clock, a really big clock, but when it fills up, suddenly there's a massive shift in the realm and some of the points are just like wiped out. They're no longer available. Or the Rune Lord, the boss that you're trying to hunt, they start hunting you after 20 ticks on the realm clock. Every clock is going to be unique, but the idea is that you can't just kind of willy-nilly wander your way around the realm with no worry about time or anything like that. Every action you take, every time you travel or do something at a point, you know the realm clock is advancing, which means it is a race against the clock, and you're making decisions about how long do I want to stay here, or how long do I have before I have to go face that big bad, before I have to go face that Rune Lord. In the Grim Coast, it's not that scary, right? It's just switching between night and day, so the stakes of the realm clock aren't as big, but you might see some kind of more dangerous stakes in future scenarios or future realms. So you move between these different points across the realm, and then at these points, you do things. So I am going to show you the first 2 points of the Grim Coast, just to elaborate sort of how the exploration rules work. So don't worry, this won't be spoiling too much for you, but the first 2 points that you can go to, 1 or 2, are the sigil, and one of them is a village, a nearby village. I'm just going to kind of highlight what you can do at a point, just so you have a general vibe of what it's like, and then I'll let you explore the rest of the realm on your own. The first thing that's important to note is that every realm has at least one sigil. Think of a sigil as like a bonfire or a site of grace or the lamps that you see in any of the other Souls-like games. It's the rest and recovery and resurrection or respawn point on the map. It's where you start every time you explore a realm, and it is where, if at any point in time you feel like you're really beaten up, you can rest at the sigil. And if you do, you get all your health back. The problem is, anytime that you rest or you resurrect, if you died somewhere else on the map and you respawn at the sigil, all of the fights that are going on the map, they all become unmarked. They become fights that you have to do again. We'll talk about what a fight is in just a second, but it's a very similar experience to what you see in Souls-like games, where the enemies reset themselves after the player dies or they decide to rest at a bonfire. So you have a sigil on the realm, and then you have points. A point can have one of or up to 4 different types of actions that you can do. Some points might not have all 4 of these. Some might have just a handful. Some might have multiple instances of some of these points. The village is a great example because it has one of each of the 4 things, which will allow me to sort of elaborate on what the actions are that you can do at a point. So for example, here is a sort of abandoned village that's in the Grim Coast that you can explore. Here are the actions that you can do. And notice that for this particular realm, the actions that are available differ depending on if it's day or night. That's the unique thing about this realm. That might not always be the case for other realms. Other realms might not care about tracking day and night, and so the options are always the same whenever you show up to them. One thing that you can do is you can search a place. Whenever you search a point, you gain some sort of item or information that's really important. Oftentimes, these items are small, they're consumables, they're like one and done sort of things that aren't going to be key to combat. They're not going to be new weapons or gear or anything like that, but instead they're going to be things that help you during the exploration side of things. So for example, you might find a healing vial here in the village, which allows you to recover 2 health anytime during exploration. So health and managing your health is a very important thing in Rune, and not everything, there are very few options or opportunities to gain health back. So a healing vial is going to be really helpful to recover between fights as you travel around the realm. Another thing you can do is learn. You can learn, which increases your lore score. We'll talk about a lore score in just a second here, but basically the learn action is an opportunity to study the secrets of the realm. One of my favorite things about Souls-like games is trying to piece together what's going on based off of environmental storytelling, reading the descriptions of items, the very few interactions you get with NPCs. Not everything is laid out for you. You kind of have to put the pieces together to understand the story. And that's what's going on with the learn action. You get a little piece of the story of the realm so that you start to understand what might be going on. You'll still have to probably put together your own theory as to what's happening, but this gives you a piece of the giant jigsaw puzzle that is this realm. It also, like I said, increases your lore score. Your lore score is an abstract score that is helpful in exploration that represents how much you know about the realm, your sort of expertise or general knowledge about the realm. As your lore score increases, it will allow you to interact with points in new ways. Now, I'm not going to, like I said, show you some of the other points in the Grimco so I don't spoil it for you, but there will be some instances where, for example, you are able to search for something, but only if you have a minimum lore score of maybe like 2 or 3. That means you have to know this region. You have to kind of know the ins and outs, know where to look for things, to find the secret paths, to find the really good items. So lore is a passive score that you really want to try and increase because it's going to give you access to the better things that you can find on a map. It will also be really important oftentimes with dealing with the Rune Lord is to know what their story is. Oftentimes that will make it easier for you to fight them, knowing their weaknesses or skipping combats to get to them. So while lore scores don't give you an immediate reward, they are still going to be helpful as you further explore the realm later on. You can also fight at locations. If the fight is listed at a point, you have to do the fight before you can do anything else at the location. So if we were to visit this village at night, we see that there's a fight. We have to do this fight before we could do this delve option below. This fight tells us that we have to fight a ghoul and 2 skeletons. It also tells us where they are located on the combat grid. The rules for the exploration rules that you can find online show you what the grid label looks like. It also tells you where you start, and notice here that if you have a lore of 2, you can start anywhere. So now you have the opportunity to ambush these enemies and be exactly where you want, as opposed to starting specifically at space C3. See, that's what the lore is allowing you to do. It gives you the edge in combat and exploration moving forward. If you clear out a fight, then you can do whatever else is going on at a point. The other thing I want to mention about fights before we move on is that fights do get marked like all of these. You can only do these things one time. You check the box once you've done it. You can't keep searching for vials. You can't keep increasing your lore. You can only do it the one time you're here in the village. Fights also get marked when they're done, but they get unmarked when you recover or rest at the sigil. So if you ever die and resurrect, or you rest at the sigil to get your health back, all fights get unmarked. You have to fight them again in order to, again, access the rest of the things at that space. The last type of action that you can do in exploration is a delve. A delve is sort of a combination of searching, learning, and fighting as sort of a more complex action. A delve oftentimes requires 1 or more requirements for you to interact with it in the first place. Either key items that you find around the map, certain lore scores, fights that must be accomplished either at that space or other spaces. Once you've accomplished the requirements for a delve, you get access oftentimes to big important things. You get access to lore increases. This is where you can find new weapons and gear. So like the good stuff, the stuff that's actually going to help you in combat, oftentimes is hidden behind these delves, these sort of like deeper dives into a location that are a little bit more dangerous, a little bit more rigorous, that ask more of you. So those are the 4 actions that you can complete at a point. Like I said, points will have some combination of these 4. They won't always have all 4, and sometimes they might have multiple instances of these. You're checking them every time you do them, showing that you've done it and you can't do it again. The one other thing to note about checking these things is that when you check a item, when you do an action on a point, it goes back and advances the realm clock. So again, you have to be careful about when you decide to interact with things. You might see that there's a bunch of options at a point and you think, why not do all of them? Well, if you do all of them, the realm clock's going to advance a whole bunch. And if that's not a thing that you're too worried about, cool. But if you think that it might end up being a pretty bad thing if you advance the realm clock, maybe you're a little bit more picky and choosy about how you interact with these spaces. That's a rough breakdown of how things work with exploration. A thing that I'll end here is that every realm is going to be unique in terms of how it manifests these things. You might find that in future realms, the clock behaves a little bit differently. Maybe there are multiple clocks. Some clocks reset, like the one here with the day and night. Some only fill up once and then they're done. Some realms will have different travel rules. For example, there might be random encounters that happen as you travel between points. Other points or other things will change what happens when you die. So for example, here, Death on the Grim Coast, when you resurrect, you're going to be cursed with something until you can get back to your body. Other realms might not have that same sort of curse. They might have a different sort of effect based off of whatever rules are unique to the realm. And so that's the important thing about exploration here, is that everything I've talked about is a general sense of how exploration works, but ultimately the realms decide the specifics. So take everything that I have here as a framework and then build specifically onto them with the realm that you are currently playing. I'm really excited about that uniqueness of realms. I think that's going to be one of the fun things about RUNE, is that every realm is going to feel like its own unique place. New rules can be introduced, but then quickly cast aside as you go to a new realm where it's a different experience. But still, generally, the framework of exploration and combat and the cycle between those two will feel familiar, that you'll still feel like you're playing RUNE, even if each realm feels pretty different from one another. So that's a kind of a rough breakdown of what exploration is. It's a little bit of a preview of the Grim Coast playtest realm. If you're excited about this, if you want to check this out, in the description below is the link to the RUNE website, where you can find the links for all of the playtest materials. You can join the Gila RPG's Discord server, where people are talking about their playtest experiences. You can find other people and share your builds, share your other things that you've been working on. And I look forward to hearing what you all think about this, and I will be sharing more future videos about how RUNE is developing over time. Thanks, everybody. Bye.